How long do we have?
We've got an hour, but
Okay, perfect.
whatever you need. Okay. Are we waiting on you, Ryan, or what are we?
We're broadcasting. We're ready to go, Dan.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to say welcome to the last keynote of the MountainMoot. Thanks for joining us. We'll kind of hang out for just a minute or so to get people to come on in. Looks like we've got over 100 people already, so that's awesome. If you have any questions during this session, there's a Q&A down below, and you can just go ahead and type them in there, and we'll try to address them. We've got some moderators in this session.
I think this is a missed opportunity for a lot of people. There's always these couple of minutes before something gets started, so you wait for everyone. And I've been on about 1,200 of these so far. And the one thing that's missing is it's an opportunity for someone to spend that time doing something with a talent, right? Like somebody should be playing the guitar or harmonica or juggling something. Something should be going on during this time, and it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. So what?
Jaime, that's a really great point. And given that this is our first online conference, and I think we're probably going to do another one, I'm definitely juggling for the next one that we do.
Okay.
I mean, everyone's got a hobby or talent. Do something, right? Like.
All right, Ryan, you want to go ahead and get us started?
Sure.
Kind of go from there.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining. We've had 3 great days of education, growth, making connections, meeting people, changing the way we think about education. And it's the MountainMoot every year is always really inspiring for us. We've been doing this for 10 years, and it always sort of refills my well of optimism and my faith in humanity to do great things and to use education to transform the world. This year has been no exception. In fact, it's been even greater. We didn't know, like all of us going into a time where we can't be together, we don't know what the future holds. It would be really easy to give up and fold and not keep improving the world through education the way that we entered education to do that. And this year has filled me with even more optimism and even more confidence in our collective ability to overcome adversity. So I want to go ahead and give just a brief introduction here at the beginning for 2 of our platinum sponsors who really made this possible. First of all, we're going to hear from Tanya Riney from IntelliBoard. So Tanya, I'm going to spotlight your video and go ahead and tell us what you do.
Hey everyone, thanks so much to Ryan and Dan especially, because we are thrilled to be MountainMoot sponsors, even though I'm really annoyed that I'm not there physically in Montana, as I have expressed. IntelliBoard is a Moodle premium integrator for your reporting and analytics. Folks who are attending, please feel free to hit us up for a 30-day free trial, which is an extension of the standard 15-day free trial. We're here to help you with your learning management as we transition to online.
All right, thank you, Tanya. Now I'm going to have Brian Carlson from eThink introduce himself and his company. So, Brian, I'm going to spotlight your video now and take it away.
Thank you very much. Ryan, Dan, you guys have done an incredible job. This conference has been pretty amazing. We've got nothing but great feedback. So congratulations on a successful online event. It seems like the feedback here we're getting even in the chat is pretty incredible. I'm the CEO over at eThink. I lead the largest Moodle partner in the world. And anything you guys need, you can stop by our page today. We're giving away some free courses to our academy, which is a couple different types of courses you can take. If you go over there, there's an opportunity to get those courses. I know there's a couple left. So stop by and take a look at our page and grab some of those courses if you can. Great conference, guys. Pleased to be here, and thanks for everything you guys are doing. Hope you guys enjoyed the keynote.
Great. Thanks a lot, Brian. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Jaime with a very brief introduction and just say I've seen Jaime speak before, and he's one of those people that will change the way that you think about yourself and your relationships to other people. He's recently taken on a new role, so I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell us about that. So, JB, I'm going to spotlight you now. Take it away.
Hey, Ryan, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Although I would also say that I wish I was in Montana. You know, like, been a couple of times, and you get out of the airport and you look out, and the first thing you think is like, wow, that's a really big sky, right? Like it's weird to say, but it's absolutely true. And I've been doing a lot of astrophotography lately, and if you go to my Instagram account, you'll see some of those pictures I've been taking, and Montana is one of those great places that I always want to visit to take astrophotography. So we're going to have to come up with excuses to getting me back there. Anyway, welcome to Flagstaff, Arizona. Not a big sky place, but, you know, nice place, where we spend a couple months in the summer to get out of the sun level heat that is in Phoenix right now. So we're up here. This is not my normal studio, but welcome here. And I'm excited to talk to you guys. And if this is terrible, and if you guys aren't getting anything out of this, I'll just, you know, we'll do some puppy time. And there's my lab. We'll get the puppy up on the screen. That'll just cure everything. That's my backup plan. Anyway, as Brian mentioned, I am, or used to be, the Chief Education Evangelist at Google. So I'm the former Education Evangelist at Google. I was at Google for 14.5 years, and I was part of the 2-person team that launched Google Apps for Education into the university space, launched Google Apps into K-12 a couple years later, and then I had this really crazy idea around launching Chromebooks into education. And then there's a bunch of other projects that I worked on. If you go to the Google for Education website, you'll see the Google for Education Transformation Center, which I always recommend people go visit, because it's a way to think about transforming education, and not just about technology, but all the other components. So I'm the author of that platform and what that looks like. So I did a bunch of things at Google, worked across a bunch of different teams. And I left a couple weeks ago in the middle of a pandemic, which is great, you know, career planning. But I left because it was time for me to do something else. And the thing that I really want to do, and I was joking about the timing because the timing is perfect, is to really, you know, get deep on equity issues and really get deep on inclusion and diversity issues. And so I'm spending my time trying to figure out the right types of projects to solve that problem. And some of that's going to be in K-12, some of that's going to be in higher ed, some of that's going to be in the private sector, some of that's going to be all over the place. If you go to my YouTube channel, and you should all subscribe to my YouTube channel, like right now, I'll wait. Okay, I'm kidding. So in my last video on my YouTube channel, I posted this idea, because people keep asking me, what's next? And there is no one next, right? There's a bunch of problems that are all interconnected that I want to work on at the same time. And I think I have this crazy theory that sometimes when you look at education, or you look at an issue of like equity in education, and you look at the entire pipeline, and you see all the different places that there are issues and problems, I think sometimes those things become so fragmented that it's hard to kind of work on them together at the same time. So I'm going to try this crazy idea around working on that problem on the pipeline through the whole thing at the same time, and find the different projects that are doing things in those spaces, so that I can at least see if I can interconnect some of those things that are happening at the same time. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm also going to be focused on helping some school systems build some new schools and all sorts of things. So I'm excited about what's happening and what's going on. But all this is still focused on education. All this is still focused on this idea that I am passionate about this because I believe education disrupts poverty. Now I also believe that education disrupts hate and racism. I think education disrupts low income status for people. I think there's a lot of things that we can do with education. And I believe this because that's what education is for me. I'm a first generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. I grew up with a single mother, grew up on welfare and food stamps, and education is the reason I'm talking to you guys today, right now. And I believe that that's the opportunity that we have, because the impact that we have on our students isn't just for the students that we face in our schools. The impact goes on for generations and generations and generations. And that's the real impact of educators. It's that it's not just a career, it's literally impacting society for generations to come. That's a great example. If you're an educator and you think about like all the students that you impacted, if you're a fourth grade teacher or a fifth grade teacher, sixth grade, it doesn't matter what grade. If you're a fourth grade teacher, you got to remember that your students, however many you face, whether it's 100 or 10,000, will never forget your name for the rest of their lives. I don't even remember my boss at Google 2 weeks ago. And you will have that kind of impact. So you have to understand that the impact goes on for generations and generations and generations. And so I think we need to really focus on education, because to me, that's the foundational thing that we can work on, right? And so it's important to think about what we do in preparation to help our students. And so let's talk a little bit about what's going on, right? Let's not pretend that we don't know what the world is like. We're going through these massive changes. We're going through these massive changes in education and society, and it's all happening at the same time. And sometimes it feels overwhelming. But let's look at a couple of things that are going on in this space. Number one is an understanding of what's happening with digitalization. We are now entering the digitalization age. Now, for 14 years, I helped schools, set up their technology, set up their Chromebooks, set all this up without even knowing that one day the 100 million users that are using these tools across the world and the millions of Chromebooks that are out there would actually become very beneficial and very important to a global pandemic. Before the pandemic, it was just almost a nice thing to have. Like, oh yeah, we should use technology. Now we're in the space where education is finally in the digitalization bucket, which is, no, this is how we do things now. And I'm not saying online, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the use of these tools. Now, if you think about digitalization, and I'm talking about everything from machine learning, artificial intelligence, AR, VR, automation, robotics, the whole package, all those things together, that's digitalization. You also have to understand that we're at the very beginning of this. We are not anywhere near understanding the impact that digitalization is going to have on our future. And our generation of kids that we have now will be the first ones to really dive deep into digitalization. They are the first true digital generation. And so just as an example to think about where we are with digitalization, Google had a breakthrough in quantum computing a couple of months ago. And probably some people just shut off right now when they heard the word quantum computing. But I'm not going to get into explaining quantum computing. I will tell you this. The breakthrough is important to understand at a conceptual level. The breakthrough in quantum computing that Google had is this. If you take an equation, one of those crazy mathematical formulas that spin forever, and you fed that calculation to a supercomputer, it would take the supercomputer 10,000 years to go through the equation. The breakthrough that Google had was that they could do it with the quantum computing program that they set up. They can do it in 300 seconds. 10,000 years, 300 seconds. Think about that gap when we will be able to do it. Now, you can't do this quantum computing on a MacBook, right? That's not what this is. This is gigantic football fields of rooms doing this process work. But the point is that we are at the very, very beginning of this. So take that idea and put it here to the side, this idea that digitalization is at the very beginning of this. Now, look at digitalization in terms of automation and robotics and all these other things, and understand that the language, there's a commonality across all these different platforms, across all these different tools. And the commonality that we have is computer science. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to go out and become a computer scientist, although you could make an argument for that. What I'm saying is that everyone needs to understand computer science, especially our students. They need to understand computational thinking. They need to understand what technology can do, because digitalization will be part of whatever solution you come up with. Wherever you are, whatever it is, you have to understand it, because it's going to be part of a solution. Now, I'll give you an analogy of what I mean by understanding. If I'm sitting right now in downtown Flagstaff, and I needed to get to the Flagstaff airport, and that's the problem I'm trying to solve, is to get to the airport. And I don't know that cars exist. What kinds of solutions would I come up with, right? I would come up with a great walking solution about how I can walk there. I'd even have all these timetables and mathematical formulas of, if I walk at this pace on this road in this shade, I'd get here at this time, so I would have to leave at this. I can create a Google Maps about walking to the airport. But if I don't know that cars exist, am I going to come up with the best solution? That's the level of understanding that we need to get our students around computer science, not to become computer scientists. And by the way, I'm not saying coding. I'm saying the concepts of computer science, so that they can actually take advantage of those, so that they understand what the solutions are that they can develop, right? And this is the reason why. Because we are entering this digitalist age, and it's going to happen faster now because of the pandemic. Automation, robotics, those things have been growing steadily for a long time, right? Those of old people like me, we remember when there were factory workers working in factories making cars. Now you look at pictures of these car manufacturing plants, and there are no people in there. There's a person pressing a button. It's all machine. We watched that evolution happen. Take a supermarket, for example. We watched the evolution of someone walking around. Think about this. Every single item in a store, somebody took one of those guns and put a price label on it, right? We went from that to the person looking at the price, putting down their glasses, and then typing that number into a register, right? We went from that to scanning, then we went to self-scanning, and then so the evolution happened slowly. Now it's going to happen faster, because change happens gradually, and then something happens, and then change happens suddenly. And that's where we are now. Because if you think about the world after the pandemic from a business owner's perspective, right? You are a business owner, you're a factory owner, you are, whether you're a CEO of a giant company or one of a small company, ask yourself what your number one risk is to your business. And the number one risk in business terms is people. People become your biggest risk, because you can't now all of a sudden put people together in the same room. You can't do process work where factory workers are doing these things, or plant workers. You've seen some of the cases that are going on in plants. People become your biggest factor, your risk. So as a business owner, what you're going to want to do is automate as much as that as you possibly can. You're going to want to create automation, robotics, machine learning, artificial intelligence to minimize the amount of people that touch the process, because it minimizes your risk. And we can see this happening in real time. The supermarket example, again, everyone was okay with gradual. I can guarantee you that right now, those concepts that you see at Amazon stores, where people walk in and they don't scan anything. They just they scan themselves in, take things off the shelf, put it in the bags that they've set up in their cart, and then just walk out of the store. I can guarantee you that that's going to happen. I can guarantee you that right now, somebody worked 24 hours last night on programming language, because that's the project that they're working on. And the competition to do that is going to increase. And we're seeing it happen in real time. In Singapore or South Korea, they've already eliminated, we call grocery store workers essential workers. And at the very same time, we're trying to replace them. They're essential, and yet we're trying to replace them, because the automation and robotics is going to minimize that risk. That's happening in real time. So we're going to see where we saw a growth of automation and robotics and technology and digitalization happen like this. We're going to see literally a hockey stick growth of these tools coming up. There's a movie theater chain in South Korea doesn't have people in it anymore. They've opened up their movie theaters and it's all automated. You walk in, you buy your ticket, there's a robot or a machine, and then you go up, you get your candy, it's all automated. There are no people in there. That's gonna happen faster and faster and faster. Now, when you think about that, if that's all true, then what we really need to think about is, what does education mean in that light? What does it mean to educate someone when machines are taking over big chunks of process work for people? Well, what it means is that we're going to have to double down on human skills. And this idea that we're comparing or competing with machines and it's humans against machines, we've watched too many Terminator movies. We've watched too many Matrix movies. That's not what's going to happen. What we need to think about is how machines and humans work together, or how humans can take advantage of all this digitalization and this technology so that it complements the human work that we do. And that's the way we have to think about this. So the first thing that every educator and every education leader should think about in any subject, just take a textbook randomly, look at a test, look at anything that's in the education space and ask yourself a very simple question. Can a machine do this? And if the answer is yes, you probably don't need to teach it, right? And so that's the way we have to approach this, because digitalization is going to impact everything that we do. Now, what are those human skills, right? This idea that human skills are the most important things that we can focus on. When my 5-year-old wakes up every day, I ask myself, or I tell myself that the skills that I want my 5-year-old to have nothing to do with subjects, have nothing to do with content. The things that I want my 5-year-old to be able to do is problem solve, critically think, have the ability to learn, be creative, and be able to collaborate with others. Those are the things that I want her to do. There's nothing surprising on that list to anyone on this video call. That list has been around for so long, and there's different versions of that list, but basically, what we call 21st century skills, which we need to stop doing because we're 20 years into the 21st century, and we still call them 21st century skills. This idea that we call them 21st century skills, when I think about why we call them 21st century skills, I think there's a subconscious thing that makes us feel like, oh, those are skills for the future. 21st century, Jetsons, that's the future. We don't have to worry about them right now, but think about them because they're going to be important in the future. And no, 20 years in, they're important right now. If you want to trigger me, and it usually doesn't take a lot to trigger me, call them soft skills. They're not soft skills. They're critical, they're essentials. They should be front and center of the things that our students develop. And then you use then the second part of that is the content, the subjects, the things that help you build those skills. So it's not understanding American history, it's learning how to collaborate and problem solve using American history. That's the way we need to think about this, because if we're just taking American history and asking kids to read a book, and then we're going to test them on whether they've read that book or not, how far are we going to get with this, right? It's not about that anymore. And again, this isn't a condemnation of education, because I'm not one of those people that says education is broken. That's not my view at all. As a matter of fact, education did exactly what it was designed to do. It nailed it. It did exactly, look, we built a superpower of a nation on the back of the education system in this country that we took seriously for a very long time. It's not that it's broken. It's not that it doesn't work. It's that the world has changed. And our job isn't to fix education. Our job is to do what our forefathers in education did 150 years ago and ask ourselves, what's the right model for the future that we face? Because they nailed it. Are we going to nail it? That's how we got to look at this. What do we need to do in education to prepare for this future? Because we did this at the beginning of every single economy. This is the digitalized economy. What are we going to do, right? So that's the way to think about it. Now, when we think about these skills, if you would have asked me 6 months ago, is there one more important than the other? Is there a priority to how we develop these skills? And 6 months ago, I would have said, nope, they're all important, do them at the same time, which is relatively still true. But I would argue that there is one more important than the other. And the pandemic has brought this out. And that is the ability to learn. That's where we need to start. We need to teach our kids how to learn. We went through a system where we had, whether we admit it or not, we had control, we had compliance, we had, where we had structure, we control the environment. We had bells and whistles and desks. We could put every aspect of education was controlled. We could do that, right? We can put the chairs a certain way. We can put the smartboard a certain way. We can tell them how to walk in the hallway. We had everything there. We can watch them, right? Okay, everyone needs to read, and some kids not, in the corner playing PlayStation 4. We can see everyone doing what they were supposed to be doing. Now we can't. And so this idea of the ability to learn is not about the ability to study, the ability to take tasks, the ability to outline a textbook, the ability to pay attention on a Zoom call for 6 hours. That's not what the ability to learn is. The ability to learn is self-centered. The ability to learn is this concept that I am assessing my skills. The ability to learn is, I don't know how to do something, now I'm going to go learn how to do it. And then I'm going to be able to determine whether I learned how to do it or not. And if I didn't, I'm going to be able to determine what the next step is. That self-contained ecosystem of the ability to learn is what our students need more than ever. It's what all humans need. And it's funny because it's a shift in how you think about things, right? So forget students, adults. In just this year, I can't tell you how many adults have said to me, you're very creative. I'm not very creative. Or adults who say, I'm not good with finance. Or my favorite one in education is, I'm not a technology person. I'm just not good with technology. Well, my response back to those adults, usually adults with degrees, usually adults with high levels of degrees, my response back to them, and this is why I don't have a lot of friends, is no, you've chosen not to be creative. You've chosen not to be good at finance, and you've chosen not to be good at technology. It's a choice. You're making a choice. Whether you realize it or not, you're making a choice. Because everything that you need to learn is out there for you. And you're choosing not to do it. It's just that simple. All the world's information is out there. All the lessons that you need are out there. Everything that you need to know. But it starts with that self-assessment. So it's not, I'm not very creative. It's, I need to learn how to be more creative. I need to get better at technology. It's funny, even before this whole internet started, I was always the tech guy, right? I was always the family technical support team where people were trying to put speakers together, or they were trying to even set up their VCR and like, oh, I can't do it. Can you help me? I was always that tech guy. And people would say to me like, how do you know how to do this? And my response was like, I read the manual. Right? That's how I learn, right? Like literally the information is out there to learn how to do this. And so it changes the mindset. Now imagine what that can do for our students who say, I'm not good at math, who say, oh, I'm just not good at reading. No, we've given them the opportunity to make that choice. What we need to do is give them the opportunity to make the choice that they can learn how to do it. When I started my YouTube channel, which all of you have gone and subscribed to, when I started my YouTube channel a year ago, I went to my oldest daughter. I have a 27-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 5-year-old. Yeah, I thought I was slick having one at a time, and and now they're all with me at the same time, and you think you're having a bad time. Anyway, so that's my problem. But my 27-year-old has a degree in film, right? She graduated in film and actually works at CNN. She makes fake news. And so she's an editor, she's the film, cameras, this is her thing. So I went to her because she's my expert. And I said, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel. I had no knowledge of video, no knowledge of how to shoot video, no knowledge of any of the tools that I need, no knowledge of how to edit any of it together, nothing, zero. I'm a photographer. I have photography equipment. I used to have, or still have good photography cameras. I didn't even know those cameras had a record button on them. I had no idea. So I said, I want to start my YouTube channel. And, you know, she laughed for 20 minutes. And then when she was done laughing, she said, okay, start here. And I remember writing this down on the legal pad. She said, shoot at 24 frames per second. You don't need to shoot in 4K. It gets the video gets compressed down on YouTube anyway, so don't shoot in 4K, shoot in 1080. The files are too big. Shoot at 24 frames per second. You're gonna have to double your shutter speed, and if you want to shoot slow-mo, if you ever want to do that, make sure you increase that shutter speed, but you're also gonna have to increase the frame rate so you have more frames to work with. And if you go outside, you're gonna need a variable ND filter if you want to keep the same motion and keep the frame rates the same, because the light will blow out your exposure. And I said, thank you. This is also helpful. Here's my next question. What the hell do any of those words mean? Zero. And now, I started with I don't know anything about videography. I don't know how to be a videographer. I don't know how to make a YouTube channel. And then I spent months learning how to be a videographer, learning how to be on YouTube, learning how to create videos. And now I can have a debate with anybody on here who's a photographer or videographer about whether or not the new Canon R5 and their 1044-bit external recording space is going to be good with C-Log, or whether you're going to have an HRG function on that camera, right? In a year. That's the ability that we have. And then I can assess whether I'm good at this, right? I can actually, there's a product, there's a portfolio. If you look at if you go watch my first couple of videos, and maybe you shouldn't do that, but if you go watch the first couple of videos, they all look like hostage videos compared to the last couple ones that I've done, right? That's the progression. And so how do we teach our students how the ability to learn? So that's the most important thing I think that we can focus on right now. And then understanding that we can do that if we start getting rid of these artificial constraints that we've put on ourselves, right? Like one of the things that's driving me crazy is how people say, our students are falling behind. What are they falling behind in? Like what level, what are they falling behind in, right? Like, okay, so we take a year to do some of this stuff, to teach them digital skills, to teach them how to learn. You don't think that they're gonna leapfrog whatever they're falling behind in the long term? We gotta get rid of some of these artificial constraints that we put on ourselves when we think about how we do this. So that's number one. The second one that I just wanna focus on, and by the way, I'm gonna talk for a couple more minutes and then I wanna answer questions. So if you guys have questions, jot them down either. I don't know if you guys are using the Q&A or the chat box, whatever it is. And Ryan, we can answer some questions at the end of this. But the second one to focus on is the problem solving one. And this one I talk about all the time, right? Which is that we ask students the wrong question. You know, we ask them what they want to be when they grow up, which is not the right question. That question, again, from the old world made sense a long time ago when jobs are stable, but change happens gradually and then suddenly, and we now live in suddenly times. We shouldn't be asking them what they want to be when they grow up. And just as a frame of reference, when I graduated graduate school, the internet didn't exist. So I couldn't spend 18 years studying how to be on the internet or how to take advantage of the internet or how to do technology if I didn't know it existed. That Google didn't exist when I graduated from graduate school. So this idea that we can predict what the job is going to be in the future is nonsense. So let's stop asking them what they want to be when they grow up. I have 5 friends that are working in jobs and industries that you don't even know about yet. That's the wrong question. The question that we should be asking our students instead is, what problem do you want to solve? What's the problem that spins in your head? That's the question that we should be asking them. And then the last question is, what do you need to learn to solve that problem? And putting it all together, by the way, the problem doesn't have to be a social problem, although we got lots of those to solve. It could be anything. You could be making cars go faster. You could be making better telescopes, better cameras. It could be any kind of issue that the student is passionate about, whatever that problem is. If you watch Shark Tank, everyone who walks into that Shark Tank is solving a problem. Most of the time, they're solving a problem that you didn't even know you had. So what's the problem that you want to solve? And then the second question, which is sometimes gets lost in this discussion, is more important, which is how do you want to solve it? How do you want to take your gifts, your talents, your experiences, your passions and solve that problem? Because there are a million ways to solve a problem. So if a student says, I want to solve climate change, you might be inclined to say, oh, climate change, you need to go be a scientist, a researcher, you need to study STEM. And in reality, maybe that's not where their talents are. There's definitely ways to solve the problem that way. But what if they're a talented photographer? What if they are just an amazing, you know, my 27-year-old has been shooting film since she was 5 years old. What if they were an amazing photographer and are able to tell amazing stories through photographs? Or they're, and combined with that, they're an amazing storyteller and writer. And now you're sending them off to a STEM program, when the way they can solve climate change is by going out and documenting climate change and telling stories about climate change. What if they're a gifted educator? The way they can solve climate change is by going out and creating education programs around climate change. Those two things can be related pretty easily. So how do you want to solve the problem? And then the third question is, what do you need to learn to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities you need to have to solve that problem? In both spaces. What do you need to know about climate change? What do you need to study about climate change? What do you need to know about photography? How do you combine, how do you build those knowledge, skills, and abilities? And when you do that, when you can do that, then all of a sudden you get focus around what it is that you learn. You get focus on what are the classes that you should be taking? What are the books that you should be reading? What are the blogs that are out there? What are the newsletter? Who can you start following or paying attention to that's solving that problem in the way you want to solve it as well? Then you can start having focus on all of that, because now you can take classes online, offline, at Stanford, at MIT, any community college, it doesn't matter. As long as the skill that you're developing matches within that framework that you've created, right? So what problem you want to solve, how do you want to solve it, and what do you need to learn to solve that problem? And this is the problem-solving generation. You got to remember, this generation is going to be the pandemic generation. I got my 5-year-old telling me to wash my hands every like 10 minutes. This is the number of germaphobes that we're going to have in this country in 10 years is just insane. This is a problem-facing generation, and they want to solve problems. Now, what time do we got? Okay, we still got a couple minutes. Now, it's important to think about those skills, because they're not soft skills. Those are skills that are essential within the content of that. Now, what do we need to do? Okay, so let's talk about the situation that we're in. What we have to avoid is trying to take that model that I talked about earlier, that control and compliance model, the school model, which served the situation right. What we need to avoid is taking that model and putting that model online. And we only had a little bit of time at the end of last school year to go through it, but it was clear that that didn't work. That doesn't work. Taking that model of what you do in a classroom where one teacher is standing in front of 30 kids and all 30 kids are listening and they're going to go through every subject by hour, and taking that and putting it online is not going to work. No matter how hard you do it. What's the definition of insanity? Doing something over and over and expecting different results. It's not going to work. So this is the opportunity that we have in front of us. What will work? Now all of a sudden we can start looking at ideas and models and things. And if all we do is take technology and put it on top of that current system, are we going to get any better results? This is an opportunity for us to think about what are the best ideas that we have in learning. What are the best ideas? Not online learning, not in classroom learning, just learning. For example, one of the videos that I posted on my YouTube channel was for my daughter, for parents about advice going through a pandemic. And not worrying so much about being a teacher, but instead being a guide. And this idea that you can take a student and guide them through learning without actually knowing anything about learning, right? So When my 5-year-old asked me, where does the water go when you pull the drain on the bathtub? The typical psychological parent answer is supposed to be, well, son, well, daughter, where do you think it goes? That's another trigger thing for me. Don't do that. That doesn't solve anything. That's basically saying, I know, but you don't know, and I'm going to hang on to this knowledge and not tell you about it. It's a control thing. My kids always said, why the hell do you think I'm asking you? I don't know, right? Like that's the way they would respond to me. So here's the better way of addressing that. The better way of addressing that is, oh, you know what? That's an interesting question. I bet you we can find out. Or, I don't know. Let's go find out. I can take that question and I try to create like marathon lengths of how long I can focus on just that one question, that one prompt, right? Where does water go when you pull the drain in the bathtub? Wait. We need to start. What is water? Where does water come from? How do you make water? You make them in clouds. Well, there's a cloud up there. It's not raining. Why is that cloud not producing water? Does that cloud have water in it? How does that cloud know it's empty? And then I can go maybe 4 or 5 hours on the question of where does water come from? Where does it go? What's precipitation? How much water comes out of our mouths every time we breathe? Is that the water that ends up in our kitchen? What's a water treatment plant? What do they do at water treatment plants? What do they put in the water at water treatment plants? What's a dam? Why do we build dams? When was the first dam built? I think you get the point. What I can't do is say, when my daughter says, where does the water go when you pull the drain in the bathtub? I can't go, wait, no, hang on. Looking through the notes. No, space. We're supposed to be studying space right now. Do you have any questions about space? We have to let our students drive that curiosity, that learning. So what are the best ideas that we know student-centric learning works. We know inquiry-based models work. We know what works. Given the world that we face today, how do we make it work with the technology that we have? What are the things that we can do to bring those ideas to life? And we don't have to have a magic solution at the end. What's the first thing we can do? What's the second thing that we can do? And then let's create this culture of innovation and iteration where every day, every week, every month, every year, we get better and better and better at this through the cycles that we create in our organizations so that we can take what works and what doesn't work and quickly adjust and do things. Because that's the possibility of technology and digitalization, is that we can do that. So with that, I will pause and answer questions that you guys might have.
All right, so Jamie, I've got a question from Peggy George. She asks, what would you expect to see when you visit a school to know that technology integration is a priority in that school? What would teachers, students, principals, and parents be doing?
That's actually, I've never had a question like that before. The way I would answer that question is by saying, not notice it at all, right? That's how I would know it's integrated, right? Is to not see it at all. We have to stop talking about ed tech. Does anybody talk about car tech? Does anyone talk about, bank tech, right? No, we just assume that technology is integrated in what we do. We don't talk about car tech. No one says, I bought this car. You should, what kind of education, what kind of technology you have in that car? It's just technology, right? It becomes integrated. So what I would see is an integration so deep that it just is education. So when I walk into a school and people start talking about ed tech, then I would say, and I've never thought about this until this question, I'd say they're not at that level. When they're talking about education and they're talking about what they're doing and they're talking about learning models and they're talking about this, and then you walk into a classroom and 20 kids are doing VR with something, then I know it's fully integrated.
That's phenomenal. So how can we best value our aging generations in a world that is changing so fast? Many are still in the workforce, but lack the training to adapt to the challenges.
Yes, and that's exactly right. They lack the training. So now, do they get the training or do they do not get the training, right? Like, again, it's one of these questions of will and choice. I'm not saying that everyone is capable of doing this. I'm not saying, my mother came to this country as a 21-year-old with no skills, and she cleaned houses for most of her life, right? Like that was, she never had the, you know, how is she ever going to take 8 hours to go to a training class, right? So she never had that opportunity. And so I get that a lot of people don't have that opportunity. But I also get that we have opportunity because of the internet, because of technology, to help build some of those skills. And again, it's not necessarily, it's part of this is doing an assessment of who you are, right? We think about skills as these hard things. But again, if technology, if computers, if visualization is taking over some of those jobs or some of those pieces of jobs, then what are the other skills that you're bringing to the table? What are your human skills that you're bringing? Your institutional experience, your knowledge, all those things that you have. How can you take advantage of those skills, right? And especially, look, one of the things that I think about as I'm older now, right? I think my 50s are my best decade because I feel like I'm inside the matrix, right? Like I walk into a meeting and like, you know, an hour meeting, I'm like, hey, we don't need to have an hour meeting. You're going to say this, you're going to say that, you're going to do this, and then you're going to do that. Okay, thank you. And then I can walk out of the meeting because I know exactly what's going to happen. The older you get, the more institutional knowledge you get, the better you can be at bringing those human skills around collaboration and problem solving to the table.
So Jaime, from Dina Vandenbosch, what advice would you give teachers who feel confined by rigid pacing guides and curriculum standards and maybe feel that they can't veer off into inquiry-driven tangents, etc.?
Yeah, no, look, this is not, I'm not putting this on, look, here's the deal. I've worked across all work groups. You know, I worked for Governor Cuomo for a couple of years, not the new one, the older one. I worked at Accenture for 7 years doing consulting work with organizations across everything. I worked on the Bank of America Nations Bank merger. I worked at United Health Group. I worked at Motorola. I worked at American Express. And I was at Google for 14 years. I worked in education. I have a pretty good sense of all work groups. You know what? There is no more passionate and dedicated workforce than teachers. Period. None. Zero. They show up on Saturdays. They spend their own money. They work tirelessly hours. Right? They're in. They're inspired. They're motivated. They're ready to go. I can make a teacher cry in 30 seconds. You cannot make a financial planner cry in 30 seconds, no matter how hard you try. We got the motivation, right? Again, back to this idea, there's 3 things that motivate humans. It's the same 3 things. Purpose, autonomy, mastery. What problem you want to solve? How do you want to solve it? What do you need to learn to solve it? We got purpose with educators. Now let's work on autonomy. They know what to do. Let's give them the tools, the resources, the training, what they need to do that. This is, again, it's a matter of choice. And so I would say to educators that have to deal with that, like, look for another opportunity where you don't have to deal with that. And I think some of these things have to change at the leadership level. So I spent a lot of time yelling at people in leadership positions about this. So this is not on the educators at all. Educators have to do what they're supposed to do, and they need jobs. And so they're not going to go off on their own. This has to come from the top down.
So from Rashida Nimmer, what is your perspective or opinion on how to push parents who are not comfortable or have no knowledge with technology to start having the responsibility to be using it in order to help their children? Our parents are struggling because they do not know how to use due to various reasons.
Yeah, that's a great question, because look, I think a couple of things about this. Number one is, what's the baseline level that they need to know? What do you want them to know how to do? And then, are we doing professional development for our parents, which might be something that we need to do? Do we need to do meetings with them? Do we need to gather them on Zoom calls, if we can get them that far, to talk to them about what is it that they have to do, and then have repetition sessions, or using our tech departments to have office hours open for parents so that they can go and get technical support, because now they're part of the solution as well. So there are things that we can think about to provide the skills that they need. Look, my wife's father, my father-in-law, is not technology savvy at all. Like, this is a guy, he's the last guy in America who walks into a bank to get cash because he has no idea how to use an ATM, right? Like we're that deep. But now He's got his iPhone. He's got his iPad. He can read his paper. He can do lots of things with technology. It's this pacing, right? It's this, oh, you want to know how to do this? Well, these are the steps. And then you show them once, and then you might have to show them 1,000 times. But what is the structure that we have in place to support our parents to learn how to do that? That's part one. The second part of that is this idea of technology and understanding that limitations are good, rules are good. Those things are good to have, and we're not telling our parents like, oh no, from now on your kids can do whatever they want on technology, and making sure that we're clear with the messaging.
So you might know that this is a Moodle, or you might not know that this originally started as a Moodle focused conference. So we have a lot of open source folks here. And I have a question from Michael Spall. What is your opinion on Google and other large tech companies creating their own versions of programs versus contributing to open source projects like Moodle? And any additional thoughts on open educational resources are appreciated.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question and a great point. I can tell you this about Google because I was there for 14 years. Google is, I think one of the reasons I was comfortable there is because Google is probably one of the most, what's the word? Wanting to build it themselves companies that like they can do it better than anyone else. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about everything, right? Google runs one of the biggest busing companies in the world, right? With their private bus line. You think they went to Greyhound and used their system? No, they created their own busing system. They created their own HR system. They created their own training system, right? They created their own professional development system. We barely go outside and buy software to plug into the stuff. I think we got Workday or a couple other things. Like Google build it themselves. And so that part of that is culture. Now, obviously it's culture because Google's not making money from most of they're not selling things, right? They're not selling Google apps, and they're not selling some of the other digital skills tools that are out there. So I think part of it is culture. And then the other part of it is that we do need to put pressure on organizations to be able to add to what we have in terms of open source. But again, let's define open source. Why is it that this open source material with these 12 things, these 12 chapters, is any better than watching these 10 YouTube videos, right? What is the objective? What is it that we're trying to learn how to do? We get too caught up in this is the way we have to learn how to do it versus this is what we want to learn. This is the concept, and there's 1,000 different ways to get there.
Thank you, Jaime. So I want to respect your time and just thank you so much for joining us. We could hang out and talk all day. We have so many questions, but I want to ask, I think, an important question for us all to think about right now. Someone has asked, what do you do to recharge your batteries? Wes Fryer asks, what are the best ways to fill your tank today to build your margin and restore your soul? And then I have one more sort of pithy question after that. So,
yeah. So for me, and this is what's great about the education space in general, is that there's some big. I like solving problems, right? That's what charges me is solving problems. It's like, and actually to the point where I actually have to work on it because in a relationship with a wife, what your job is to listen, right? My wife comes in with like, I gotta talk to you about something. What is it? I'll solve it. What's the problem? I go right to solving it, right? Like that's what I like to do is solve problems. So that's where I get my charge. And it's hard for me to just listen sometimes. Okay, now I'm getting into personal relationships, which probably suggests that I need some time off. But so that's where I get my charge. But then on top of that, as much as the world is falling apart and things, you got to find your outlets. You got to find your things that motivate you, that get you going. And for me, it's photography. If you go to my Instagram account, you'll see that I do a lot of astrophotography. So next week, I'm taking 2 days off and I'm going up to the north rim of the Grand Canyon by myself to sleep in a cabin to take astrophotography pictures, right? So I find my way, and that's my creativeness, right? Like I feel happy doing that. I love editing my photos and I love going through that. So finding that thing that's for you is absolutely critical.
All right, last question from an anonymous attendee.
Oh, no.
When are you running for, what's that?
These are always good.
When are you running for president?
So we often joke in my household about me running for Senate here in Arizona at some point in the future. And my wife clearly reminds me every time it comes up. And sometimes I just bring it up because I like to hear her answer. And her answer is like, you can't stand people. The job is to be with people. And what she's really saying is you can't stand, people. And so she reminds me of that all the time. And then we joked actually a couple weeks ago, like this would have been I missed this opportunity. This would have been a great time to run for office because I could be campaigning and not talk to anybody. Like that's the ultimate world. I know this is hard to believe, but I'm an introvert, right? If you told me 6 months ago and you said, hey, listen, for the next 6 months or however long from now, you can't go anywhere. You can't visit anywhere. You can't have anyone come visit you. You can't go to visit anyone anywhere. You have to stay in your studio, locked up by yourself for we don't know how long. And I would think that they were punking me. I'm like, what is this? Where's the joke in all this? Like, because that's heaven for me. So I appreciate the opportunity to think about like running for something, but here's the truth. I'm going to help people who help education, right? So I'm going to get involved in campaigns. So I'm helping Mark Kelly here in Arizona run for Senate. I'm helping anyone who says education and equity issues are important, and I'm going to go help them, and I'm going to go be a voice for them. And now that I'm by myself and independent, I can go do that without worrying about what it looks like for the company I represent.
Jaime, thank you so much. This has just been a wonderful experience. I know for sure that everybody here is really enjoying it. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it in the chat. I've seen it in the Q&A. Thank you so much for your impact on the world. We really appreciate you.
Thanks. And if I didn't answer any questions and you guys had burning questions, my message button on Twitter is open. So just hit me up there or on LinkedIn, or, everyone here subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. But, there's lots of places to get a hold of me.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So everybody, thanks for joining us for this keynote. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you again to Jaime Casap. Our next session starts at 11 a.m. So go get a snack, get another coffee, and join our presenters in their sessions. You can find them on the MountainMoot Moodle page. And don't forget to vote for the unconference sessions that are happening at noon. We're going to have informal tables where we all get to get together and talk about ideas. I have the idea that maybe there might be some additional sessions that you want to suggest in that unconference suggestion area after this keynote. So let's get together and have lunch and talk some of these things out amongst ourselves. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you shortly.